Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? How are things in your neck of the woods? Where is your neck of the woods? I don't know. You tell me. It is Tuesday, August 9th, 2016. Donald Trump has us flummoxed again. He just never stops reaching for the stars of idiocy, essentially. He's nuts, and there's not that much we can do about it. I guess we'll have to let the election go forward. I've been noticing, I guess he's, today he's under attack because it's so hard not to attack him for the nonsense, not only in his supposedly major economic address yesterday, which by the way, we're going to have a few things to say about, of course. But this morning, I guess, the thing that everybody seems to be talking about is the 50 national security experts who have signed on to a letter saying, yeah, we're never going to support Donald Trump. We are going to have to go with Hillary Clinton on this one. She's the only one with her head screwed on, right? And his answer is classically Trump and classically kindergarten. Well, I wasn't using them anyway, and I never would. And what they really are is jealous that they're not on my campaign, and I'm not going to use them because. And then he goes into his standard answer, which I've been making fun of, this morning. Just it's amazing the pattern he falls into. Just one, always attacking. I wasn't using them anyway. Like that's the measure of whether they're worth anything. Well, if I'm not using them, then they're not the best. You know how he thinks. But then going into, look at Iran, look at the Middle East, look at Syria. It's a mess. It's a mess. Believe me, it's a mess. And our politicians, they don't know what they're doing. And these people, they're the ones who made it a mess. Why would I use them? I don't want it to be a mess like this. Of course, there are such things as worse messes, but that doesn't occur to anybody that he's speaking to and getting through to anyway. And I guess it's just a matter of time until he answers all questions that way, no matter what the topic is. As you can see, as I've been tweeting this morning, if you've been following. Anyway, if you haven't, time to start now. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Bill reminds us, Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, has highlights of Trump's Detroit speech and then an hour and 59 minutes of other stuff. What is the highlight? As far as I'm concerned, of course, the highlight of the situation, the whole speech yesterday, which was supposed to be a very serious and high-minded one. It was supposed to actually address issues surrounding the economy, but he doesn't know anything about the economy. I know it's supposed to be his big selling point. He's a very rich guy, so economy. But he operates outside of the economy. And the economy, many of you may know, is that I don't know what you even call it, but that sphere in which, let's call it that sphere in which a supplier of goods and services would get paid for supplying those goods and services to consumers who consume them. And Donald Trump just doesn't exist in that world. That's not what he does. In his world, of course, he consumes goods and services and then declines to pay for them, like Newt Gingrich does, but at a grander scale. And, of course, he is a participant in the consumer economy as a supplier. He insists that people pay him for the goods and services that he supplies to them, even if he doesn't supply them, by the way. The idea is you wanted the thing, so put down a deposit, I'll take that, and then if I don't supply you with the thing, that's a thing we might have to settle in court. I don't know. Some people say this, some people say that. That's just generally, he doesn't understand the economy. So I wasn't looking for great things in this speech anyway. Nonetheless, he got positive reviews for the speech from some corners because he read the speech on the teleprompter and he didn't wander very much. But that's not what's shown through. And at least for most of the afternoon and evening, The speech became known. It's not, don't call the station. This is Donald Trump's problem. For most of the afternoon and evening, it became known as the titties speech. It really did. Donald had a little bit of a slip up, got himself tongue-tied in executing the speech. Again, he was just reading off the teleprompter, which is terrible because Obama something. Anyway, he was, I guess he was supposed to be touting the benefits of an urban economic development type of program. I don't even know what he was talking about. It doesn't matter. I mean, this was the most coherent of his speeches because he was reading it right off of the teleprompter and trying not to wander very far. But he began to describe how his program, I guess, would encourage investment in America and in cities in particular. And he was and he said, and this is going to result, by the way, in trillions of dollars pouring into, and I guess he couldn't decide whether to say towns or cities, and you know how that goes. And he settled on a hybrid in the middle and said that trillions of dollars would be pouring into titties like right here in Detroit. And I don't know how the audience reacted. I didn't get to see it live. All I've seen is the clips of it being played in GIFs across Twitter. I don't know. I didn't save any because it didn't seem that tremendously important. But of course now you probably feel like you wanted to see that. If you didn't, not a major moment, rhetorically speaking, in the speech, but funny nonetheless. And I mean, if you can get away with flushing what was supposed to be a major address down the toilet by referring to it as the titties speech, then I think you ought to take that opportunity. But I will say this, it is not happening this morning. I just don't see a lot of talk about it. We're on to the next various gaffes. And, what can you do? There's only so much you can get out of this. I really hoped that we'd be talking about that in the morning because, gosh, how much fun is that to spend the morning saying that? All right. Did you watch the Olympics last night? I didn't watch nearly as much coverage last night. I guess I'm down on the International Olympic Committee now, and so the Olympics are spoiled for me forever. I'm going to try and watch them for the athletic value and not think about the logistics behind it. And we'll move on from there and just watch the competition. Speaking of the competition, Kate Sherrill just wants everybody to know that because she's in Indiana, celebrating 3 Hoosiers winning gold medals last night. And congratulations to all of them. Who are they? I don't know. Here are the names. Lily King, I'm going to read from the bottom because the first name, well, you'll see. Lily King, Steele Johnson. Wow. That's a name. And David Boudia, Boudia. I have no idea who anybody is. I wasn't watching their sports. I'm sure they were fantastic. And go USA type people from Indiana. So that, congratulations. Gold medals. People like them. Yesterday's Twitter was burning up with the fact that all the newspapers, I guess, in the Chicago area were reporting that one of the Chicago Bears players' wives won a bronze medal, and I believe it was in a shooting event, and people rightly complaining. She was basically being described as a Bears player's wife, and it's like, well, she has a name, and she's an Olympic medalist, and all that. Well, I don't know the Bears player's name either, so I guess I can't be faulted for exactly the same thing, but yeah, another story I didn't put aside, but I wondered if you had seen it. Just trying to find out if we have a shared common ground in each morning's pop culture news. So we'll see. I still can't tell you whether that's the case or not. And an interesting check-in from Parleo, just letting us know what the situation is in Spain. Sunny, 79 degrees. How's the traffic? In case anybody's driving to Spain. Looks like it's going to be okay, but 230 days without a government. So, I don't know. Does that mean the libertarians are celebrating? Are they happy with that? You don't need one? Not real sure. But anyway, plenty to go over today. We are without Greg Dworkin this morning, and perhaps I ought to keep the front page of Ye Olde Daily Kos open just to scan for news touchstones, if you will, just to be sure that we're all on the same page. Top of the front page this morning, of course, at the moment anyway, Republicans continue to jump off the Trump train wreck, as noted by Barb Morrill, letting us know that Susan Collins is deeply troubled by Donald Trump, but has actually taken the leap, which is not something she does all that often. And she says, yeah, that's it. I'm not doing the Trump thing. An op-ed in the Washington Post, a very staid Republican Mainer sort of way to, Washington/Mainer way to announce this. And in her op-ed, I guess the crucial passage here, with the passage of time, a different kind of passage. Get it? With the passage of time, I have become increasingly dismayed by his constant stream of cruel comments and his inability to admit error or apologize, but it was his attacks directed at people who could not respond on an equal footing, either because they do not share his power or stature or because professional responsibility precluded them from engaging at such a level, that revealed Mr. Trump as unworthy of being our president. Well, that is very true. Of course, we'd be talking at least about the Khan family, who I guess ended up responding quite robustly, despite their lack of stature. But everyone was interested in what they had to say, thankfully, and allowed them to have their say. But of course, also Judge Curiel, who was, I imagine that's who she had in mind when she mentions not being able to respond on equal footing because of professional responsibility. Anyway, it's astounding how many are coming out and saying this, but I guess we're not surprised at this point, and of course Susan Collins. But I guess it's a surprise anytime Susan Collins commits to doing something after finding herself so deeply troubled. Anyway, moving on with morning housekeeping. Again, we thank Bill for his patience with our slow uptake every morning and his dedication to listening to the show and starting us off each morning with a fun morning tweet. And we rank high enough at this point. We rate a mention in today's Cheers and Jeers, as it happens. And this really puts a fine point on things. Live, it reads here, for half a decade, and I guess we're at that now. He notes, we are just about, it'll be next week when we're, of course, off the air and can't celebrate. And I don't really know what we would do in an on-air celebration anyway. Probably drink, and that wouldn't be such a bad thing. It is a little early, but time zones being what they are, somewhere it's worth trying. We're at the 5-year mark. Some point next week, we officially hit the day, hit the nail on the head at our 5-year. We've been doing this for 5 years, and I cannot tell you why we have done this. However, live for half a decade, it's true. Daily Kos Radio is on the air. Bill puts it this way: I hear voices in the morning. They talk to me. The voices do. I can see already. I'm gonna have to bleep myself if I read on. Yet, I'm the only person in the room. It makes me shout, "What sorcery be this, demon spawn?" Which makes the neighbors yell, "It's your effing radio, you moron." But it's not just any radio. It's Daily Kos Radio, the blog post you can hear. Hosted by me, front pager. Still true. Every once in a while I come through with a gun piece. David Waldman, a.k.a. Kagro X, the nationally known gun fail compiler and tamer of GOP filibuster abuse. It's true, I do it in between radio shows. 5 years ago this week, along with beloved mild-mannered Cossack Armando, a.k.a. Armando, David took to the airwaves of Sirius XM radio. I'll add the XM for branding purposes. That's true, we did start this whole thing with a once-a-week Saturday morning gig on actual Sirius XM radio. That's where we first kicked this off, and then we decided it would be a lot more fun if we just sort of hung out at home and read the news, and how could we possibly do it? And Netroots Radio made it possible. Who cares about satellites? We didn't even need to launch any. Didn't need them. Of course, they're probably working in the background to make this whole internet thing work. But anyway, here we are. Armando was by my side at the time, and we actually had to do it that way. We had to go into the studio and sit more or less side by side, and then we found out we didn't need to. You could cook it at home. Anyway, so there we were. After their radio play about a Martian invasion caused nationwide panic, Sirius suggested that perhaps their talents might be more appreciated elsewhere and changed the locks. But Sirius's loss was netrootsradio.com's gain. Today, Kagro in the Morning airs live Monday through Friday from 9 to 11 Eastern. That's true. You know that. You can listen to the podcast anytime, of course, as many of you are doing. And by the way, thank you very much for some of you who have migrated over to the YouTube format. We're having some mild success with that. Where do we stand in listenership these days? You'll recall that early on we were getting some very inflated and very misleading, though very impressive sounding numbers from Libsyn. And I guess that at that point Libsyn began to realize, hey, I think that when you embed our player on the front page of Daily Kos, it counts every hit to the front page of Daily Kos as a download of the program. That can't be right. I had some serious doubts about those numbers. Anyway, finally, with things having been hammered out and getting what I guess is a more accurate count, I mean, we came way down in the numbers, which was not surprising. Frankly, the numbers that we were getting didn't make any sense, and we didn't tout them all that loudly anywhere because they just didn't strike us as likely to be true. It would have been very nice. Anyway, at this point, we now have about, well, on good days, like the last couple of weeks, the numbers have risen steadily from 1 to 2 to now nearly 3,000 downloads daily, just through the Libsyn application and the Libsyn player. Untold numbers downloading via iTunes, because iTunes won't tell you what the numbers are. I find that amazing that they won't share that, but they don't. We have about 400 to 500 people downloading daily at Stitcher. We've got about looks like we're doing in the neighborhood of about 120 plus, sometimes as many as 200 plays of the YouTube videos each day as well. Plus, well, I haven't monitored the numbers from some time. I know they are monitorable, but how many people are listening live through Netroots Radio's player on any given day? I don't know. A lot. Not a whole lot. But I think we're probably originally the old player could only handle about 100 people at once. So it may be that that's still the case. But of course, you can also listen live through Stitcher, through TuneIn, through We Act Radio's website, through and of course, again, through the netrootsradio.com player directly. So it's been a thing. We continue to do it. We're not 100% sure why. We just know we feel like we can't stop. So there we are. Now live each day on Netroots Radio, and as Bill continues for 2 hours, David unpacks the day's big stories in politics and current events with wit, outside the Beltway common sense, and I mean barely outside the Beltway. A voice on loan from James Earl Jones. Oh, come on now. And just enough incredulity at the state of things to make you wonder if he's just moments away from going Howard Beale on the world, but he says he doesn't do it alone. And that is true, and I have a nice big piece that, well, frankly, I feel the same way each time the anniversary comes around, and I want to stick with it the way it was crafted the first time, but thanks all around. Justice, who makes things work each morning. Greg, who joins us here almost every day. Armando, who joins us very frequently. Joan McCarter, who makes a regular Wednesday appearance here. I couldn't do it without all of them. And of course, now I in the last year or so, I've realized that I could never have continued. I don't think I really could have made it to the 5-year point. 4 years might have been a breaking point without the help in the last year or so of Scott Anderson, who has freed me up in the immediate post-broadcast hours to actually accomplish a life, to eat lunch, to get up, to take care of children, to run errands, to get some exercise, to take care of myself. I used to be pretty much bound to the computer. Once, when the microphone shuts off at 11, there's post-production to be done, just in terms of preparing the recording to be posted as a podcast. But to summarize the show so that we can put up that afternoon post with the links to all the articles, which I never really have figured out whether anybody actually feels like it's super important to have, but it's super important to me. And I think to the everybody who's peripherally involved, directly involved, or just wanders by the radio show, I don't know. There's something about the I guess that keeps us grounded in blogging ethos, right? You can't blog about something without providing links, and you can't, just because you're on the radio, just blab about it and then say, figure out for yourself whether it's true or grounded in reality. We feel like the links have to be there. And I assume an audience that listens to a program like this with any regularity wants to be able to see the stories for themselves, share the stories with people that they know who might not have listened to the program. And, well, at any rate, I find it to be an essential part. I feel like I haven't done my job if we haven't put something down in writing. But that used to, like I say, bind me to the computer for hours afterwards. And I think it was largely in part, at least, the problem of listening to your own recording, listening to your own show, and you couldn't step away from it, and it's also very difficult to listen to your own 2 hours over again to figure out what the hell did I say and where did I pull that from anyway. And Scott has got it pretty much down to a science at this point, but I used to find myself working on it and finally getting the mini blurb ready for the midday Linky post at about 3 p.m. my local time. So we're talking about getting on the air at 9, and I'm chained to the desk until 3. And by that time, I'm stressed out. I can't get anything done. Kids are coming home from school. Scott's really saved us in the last year or so. So thanks very much to him. So new addition to the round of thanks for everybody there. Okay. Wow. I don't know. I felt like I needed to pour it all out there for just a second. So, thanks very much also to Bill for the promote. You can't beat that kind of promotion. And, I'm looking forward to the next wave of new Kagro in the Morning listeners generated by this nice tribute. Thanks very much. Rebecca Romans also tweeting, happy 5th anniversary from one of your daily live listeners. Thanks for making my mornings interesting. I appreciate it. Thanks very much for everyone who's here. Today would be a great day if we had unlimited time for me to run down the list of all the fantastic folks who have donated along the way to just keep things chugging along here. We're not self-sustaining at this point, but at least it gives me a couple of bucks to make a token thank you each month to Scott, and I appreciate that. And maybe, we build things, and little by little, we get to the place where maybe in our 15th year or so, we'll actually be self-sustaining, and I will be able to tell people that I do this for a living. How about that? Note from Justice, by the way. I guess the player is much improved. He says there's about 200 people listening live right now just via the netrootsradio.com stream. That would not include how many people are listening live via Stitcher or iTunes or TuneIn or We Act Radio or have a cup up to the wall in any of the neighboring homes. That's a possibility. You never like to think about that one, but it could be happening. Speaking of that kind of interesting surveillance, lots of interesting developments in the Roger Ailes story. Why don't we get back on track by jumping in to the latest there? I mentioned, and I read to you the story of the coverage of New York Magazine on Ailes' inside skunk works, his personal PR and investigative arm that looked into the activities of his personal and political enemies, and occasionally would then feed that information via a few whitewashing steps, a few laundering steps, right back to Fox News so that it could become a some say story. Well, now the focus shifts back, at least momentarily, to Roger Ailes and his behavior with the women inside the operation, and specifically his sexual harassment of them. We have to catch up on that one, and I better kill this other story before it starts auto-playing video on me here. Let's begin with Andrea Tantaros, whose name I've never been entirely sure of how it's pronounced. Did she just say Tantaros or Tantaros? Or I have no idea. I don't watch that programming. But Gabriel Sherman chiming in again with this little bit of news. We haven't called her number in some time, and as it turns out, the reason is she hasn't been on the air for some time. Fox News host Andrea Tantaros says she was taken off the air after making, guess what, sexual harassment claims against Roger Ailes. A shocking headline, but shocking not just because you can't believe that he's doing this to their famous on-air talent who supposedly would have exactly the kind of platform you would need to put a stop to this sort of behavior, but apparently it never really worked out for most of them. But also kind of shocking because she's not been the most supportive of other women who have made sexual harassment claims against prominent conservative figures, let's say. So none of the Fox women have been particularly supportive. They instead their comments generally run to the, they're just looking for 15 minutes of fame type of reaction. And it's amazing, especially when you consider that this was likely happening to them, maybe even as they were making those comments. And I guess that really, it certainly highlights a certain kind of hypocrisy, but it may also highlight the really the most insidious part of an atmosphere like the one Roger Ailes was creating, the sexual harassment atmosphere, where normal, logical reactions to things either aren't possible or they are made impossible by the manipulation of the person doing the harassing. I mean, the whole problem with it is the amount of leverage they hold over you. If it was just a stranger doing this to you, reporting it wouldn't be an issue. But, I mean, think about the level of mind games and the manipulation going on to have your boss sexually harassing you inside of a conservative news organization, and one, not want to jeopardize your great job, two, know that you'd be bringing down the wrath of a very powerful person with their own internal secret police unit, and three, I guess probably have to convince yourself that it wasn't happening to you because of the demands of, I don't know what, your own professional demands, your worldview as a conservative, and then having to lash out, and maybe that's even a defense mechanism, lashing out against other people who claim to be experiencing the same thing. Maybe that helps you justify your not doing anything in your own situation. The psychology of the situation is way beyond my capacity to straighten out for you. But so I'll just give you the news as Gabriel Sherman reports it. Fox News' senior executives have said they were unaware of sexual harassment allegations against Roger Ailes before Former anchor Gretchen Carlson filed a lawsuit against him in July. But those claims are now being challenged by Fox host Andrea Tantaros, who says that she complained multiple times to senior Fox executives in 2015 about Ailes' inappropriate sexual behavior toward her. Tantaros says that after she came forward, she was first demoted and eventually taken off the air in April 2016. Fox continues to pay her, so that's not the worst thing in the world, but I'm sure it doesn't feel all that great, and they probably think they're buying leverage over her and keeping her mouth shut, but I hope that won't be the case in the end. Through her lawyer, Judd Burstein, Tantaros says that both she and her agent told Fox Executive Vice President Bill Shine, Senior Vice President Suzanne Scott, and General Counsel Diane Brandy, we had her name yesterday, about episodes of Ailes' alleged harassment. She made multiple harassment and hostile workplace complaints, Burstein says. As far as Tantaros knows, Fox executives never investigated her complaints, Burstein says. Instead, they claim Fox sidelined her. I believe it's retaliatory, says Bernstein. Fox's attorneys dispute this. The network says Tantaros was suspended with pay because she violated company policy by not allowing Fox to vet her 2016 book, Tied Up in Knots, How Getting What They Wanted Has Made Women Miserable. That's going to be touchy now. Fox attorneys told Burstein the network was embarrassed by her book's cover, which depicts Tantaros bound by ropes. I'm sure that totally embarrassed them. According to Tantaros' account, Ailes began harassing her on, she knows the date, August 12th, 2014. When did she first get to the network? Was she living harassment-free before then? I don't know. Anyway, during a meeting in Ailes' office, Ailes allegedly asked Tantaros to do, quote, the twirl so he could see her figure. She refused. Then, in mid-December of that year, Ailes made another advance, Burstein says. Ailes asked her to turn around, and then he said, come over here so I can give you a hug. Yeah, certainly not the worst I've ever heard, but creepy nonetheless, and everything you need to establish the hostile work environment and sexual harassment. I mean, he's not hitting her over the head with a clock, and all right, anyway. But, is there any clearer message than, gee whiz, every time I come into this guy's office, he's asking me to turn around so he can look at me and then, come over here and give me a hug. Ugh. It's about as creepy as it gets. And it's about as definitive as it gets, and it's about how about 90% of sexual harassment in the workplace actually goes, I think. In February of 2015, Tantaros was pulled off of the 5 p.m. program The Five and demoted to working full-time on the midday show Outnumbered. In February 2015, according to Burstein, Ailes allegedly harassed Tantaros again in his office, asking about her workout routine because her body, quote, looked good, and mentioning that she must, quote, really look good in a bikini. I wonder if Donald Trump would agree. And, by the way, this is also exactly the sort of thing that people like Ailes, harassers like Ailes, and Donald Trump. I don't know whether he's got accusations against him. I don't know whether there's a whole lot of people accusing him of sexual harassment, but there are other people accusing him of just outright rape. Of course, there's that. But anyway, this, it seems to me, is the kind of behavior that people like Ailes and Trump, again, I'll have to say it, think they can get away with. Not so much like I'm above the law or I'm a very powerful person and so I can get away with it. They think anybody can and should be able to get away with that. What am I saying? And that's sexual harassment. You're creating a hostile work environment. Well, I'm saying you look good. I'm giving you a compliment. Everybody wants to find out they look good. Who doesn't want to be told they look good? I'm just saying, you look like you're exercising. I'm interested in your exercise routine. I'm just interested in your life. Come on. And it's the sort of thing that sows doubt in, well, if necessary, in the minds of juries, but I think more to the point in the minds of their targets. Like, I can buy extra time for myself either to try and talk myself out of harassing this person because they're obviously sensitive to it and might actually make me pay for it, or I just want to buy myself more time to try to come up with a better approach that I can harass her with more and maybe not be caught or whatever it is. But you see what they're doing here. I'm trying to sow doubt in your mind. It's a little bit like the gaslighting thing, if not the very definition of it, right? No, come on. You think you're being harassed. But all I'm doing, I'm just giving you a compliment. Just between friends, you look good. You're looking good. Did you lose weight? You look good. You look healthy. You got a glow about you, you know? Okay, maybe I'm not being harassed. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's just old-fashioned. But, then, of course, you must really look good in a bikini. Well, he's from a different time. Yeah, you can see how this stuff begins to work. Of course, Donald Trump would then say, I want you to actually get into a bikini. And people would say, no, that's beyond ridiculous. I didn't bring one with me, besides which that's totally unprofessional. Hey, don't worry about it. I have bikinis here for you. And besides, unprofessional, you're a model. I have a modeling agency. You might be interested in being in a beauty pageant. I have a beauty pageant that has a swimsuit competition. What's the big deal? Come on, honey, try it on. What do you say? I'm just saying you look good. I'm proud of you for being healthy. Oh. So that's somewhere between Donald Trump, Roger Ailes, Howard Stern, and Andrew Dice Clay for your teleplay there. All right. On April 30th, 2015, Tantaros filed a formal workplace harassment complaint about Ailes to Shine, Burstein says. The following day, I'm getting tired of saying Burstein says. Somebody really needed to edit this out differently. The following day, Burstein says, Tantaros met with Shine to further discuss her harassment claims. Shine allegedly told her, Roger is a very powerful man, and that she should not fight this. In August, her agent spoke with Brandy about the episode. That's Diane Brandy, the Fox attorney, right? According to the agent, Brandy said she would look into the matter but did not follow up. After making more complaints to Shine and Scott over the course of the next year, Tantaros was suspended from the network in April of 2016. All of a sudden, the book became this big issue, Burstein says. A few weeks before she was suspended, Tantaros hired Burstein, an aggressive litigator, Burstein says, he doesn't really say that this time, who has a history battling Fox, interestingly enough, to negotiate the dispute over her book. Burstein had negotiated a multi-million-dollar severance package in 2013 for Brian Lewis, who? Ailes' then communications chief, who was fired by Ailes after he accused Lewis of being a source for the Ailes biography again, Gabriel Sherman, being the I, was writing at the time. Where were we here? I had to skip back up to make sure I got the name right. Burstein says Tantaros, who is still employed by Fox, knows she is taking a risk in violating her contract's confidentiality clause. That's why they're paying her. She's telling her story now, she says, because, quote, she doesn't have the same fear of being attacked by the Fox PR machine, I guess now that it's exposed, and the Murdochs have made it clear that they want to clean up the place. Maybe. Anyway, Gabriel Sherman doing a great job here because I think exposure of the PR machine is probably what helps people like Tantaros stop fearing it so much. This way they know if the bad PR comes out, they can point to and say, this is where it's coming from. This is an attack against me because of the accusations I'm making, not because it's true. Fox did not immediately respond to a request for comment, and other sources have questioned Tantaros' account, like probably the rest of the women still on the air at Fox. BuzzFeed reported that Tantaros did accuse at least 4 people, including 2 on-air contributors, a correspondent, and a host, of inappropriate behavior, but never made a complaint against Ailes. Okay. Well, that's just one of the Tantaros stories and one of the New York Magazine entries in all of this. There's another Tantaros story from BuzzFeed, and let's go over to that one. Kyle Blaine for BuzzFeed. Headline on this one, months of messy legal dispute preceded Tantaros' removal from Fox News. And I guess they're going to be talking to Burstein again here because the subheader Through a lawyer, Tantaros has alleged her removal was retaliation for complaints against Roger Ailes. Two sources provided new details of a months-long legal battle over Tantaros' book, including a March letter that alleged, quote, inappropriate male behavior from 4 Fox News employees, though not Ailes. Her lawyer said Monday there is documentation of her earlier, broader allegations. Let's go to the main body of the story. Fox News personality Andrea Tantaros alleged on Monday that she was taken off the air after reporting she was sexually harassed by then-chairman and CEO of Fox News, Roger Ailes. Two sources, one with direct knowledge of the legal proceedings involved, provided new details to BuzzFeed News on Monday of the complicated, months-long legal proceedings that led up to Tantaros' removal. The dispute, and by the way, usually months-long complicated legal proceedings that lead up to someone's removal, it's supposed to be the removal of the person doing the harassing. But and that guy has now eventually been removed, but not through the HR process. You had to go above and beyond that. But that's going to be the case with almost any CEO, probably. The dispute was initially about her new book, according to the sources, but developed into an internal investigation involving more than a dozen people after Tantaros alleged that Fox News employees had behaved inappropriately towards her and that threats had been made against her. Tantaros' lawyer disputed that there had been such an investigation. Really? During the legal proceedings, according to the sources, Tantaros alleged that she had been mistreated by several Fox News employees, both men and women. 5 specific allegations, including inappropriate male behavior, were detailed by Tantaros' legal team in March 2016 in a letter made available to BuzzFeed News. Ailes, not among those accused in that letter. Tantaros' last appearance on Fox News, April 25th, the day before her book, Tied Up in Knots, was published. According to the source with knowledge of the legal proceedings, and here's a source without knowledge of them, I think they're awesome. There you go. That's I don't know why. We'll see what they have to add to that one. Anyway, according to the source with knowledge, Tantaros' dispute with Fox began in late February when Tantaros revealed the cover for her book on the Fox News show Outnumbered. Fox News claims Tantaros did not receive their contractually required approval for the book or the cover, and when Tantaros unveiled it on February 29th, which you only have the opportunity to do once every 4 years, Fox News' legal team requested a meeting with her to discuss the breach of contract, and I think they may be right on that part. Before that meeting occurred, Tantaros' lawyer at the time, Joseph C. Kane, sent Fox News' legal team a letter detailing a series of allegations. The 4-page letter was made available to be reviewed by BuzzFeed News and read in its entirety on the condition that it not be published. In the March 16th letter, Tantaros, through her lawyer, accused by name 4 Fox News male personalities, 2 on-air contributors, a correspondent, and a host of inappropriate behavior. Tantaros also alleged that she was receiving threatening tweets she believed were from a Fox News colleague. Ooh, creepy. In the letter, Tantaros' lawyer claims Fox News was not taking those threats seriously and was putting her life in danger by allowing unauthorized access to the studio. The letter contends that Tantaros fulfilled her contractual obligations with the book and told Fox News that she did not need to provide it with a copy of the book ahead of time. Okay, well, that's what she has to say about that one. I don't know whether they agree. The letter also describes a dispute with specific Fox News personalities, over a tweet sent by Tantaros, and alleges that Tantaros did not feel like she was being supported by Fox News' media relations team. According to the source with direct knowledge, Fox News investigated the allegations, interviewing more than a dozen employees. When Tantaros sat down with Fox News' legal and HR team on April 7th, she was asked directly if she could recall any specific statements made to her of a sexual nature. According to the source with direct knowledge, she answered that she could not recall. Initially, Fox News told BuzzFeed News that the company thoroughly investigated the claims Tantaros made. Subsequently, through a spokesperson, Fox News senior EVP of programming Bill Shine, remember him, said, quote, Andrea never made any complaints to me about Roger Ailes sexually harassing her. In a statement to BuzzFeed News, Tantaros' lawyer, Judd Burstein, said, There was no investigation by Fox of more than a dozen employees. All of these quotes are very weirdly, just barely wrong for the context. I don't know whether that's the writing or whether that's clever lawyering. Burstein said there are documents authored by Fox that demonstrate that broader allegations were made at earlier points in time and that Fox has contradicted itself in its own communications, documents that were not provided to BuzzFeed News. Burstein said the source has completely misrepresented what took place at just one meeting, including what Ms. Tantaros actually said at the meeting, which primarily dealt with different events. He added that the source, quote, has omitted the numerous complaints about Ailes made prior to Mr. Kane's letter, which by the time of his letter, I guess, has been shown to be futile. Why has Fox News Executive Vice President Bill Shine chosen to remain silent instead of relying upon Fox to make a selective disclosure by an unnamed source? Burstein said. In the coming days, the truth will come out in much more detail. That was unhelpful. Tantaros, through Burstein, has alleged she was sexually harassed by Ailes in August of 2014 and February of 2015. The must look good in a bikini comments, etc. Before she formally reported the harassment to Shine in April 2015. New York Magazine reported that Tantaros made more complaints about inappropriate behavior over the course of the next year, and then the book became this big issue. This summer, Gretchen Carlson's lawsuit alleging sexual harassment from Ailes has opened the floodgates of detailed allegations from former employees against Ailes. Last month, Ailes resigned. Burstein suggested Tantaros' removal from Fox News' air was retaliation for reporting those claims against Ailes. And then the final of our entries, I guess, into this category, slightly different focus. A little bit more about Roger Ailes in this one. Again, back to New York Magazine, this time Margaret Hartman, who I think has also had an entry in this yesterday. Today this reads this way. New reports suggest the atmosphere at Fox News under Roger Ailes was more Nixonian than previously thought, though none of it should really come as a surprise since Ailes got his start in politics working for our most paranoid president. On Monday, Vanity Fair reported that the settlement in Gretchen Carlson's sexual harassment lawsuit against Ailes may reach 8 figures due to, quote, the existence of audio tapes recorded by multiple women in conversation with Ailes. 2 people familiar with the tapes said. Now we're talking. The magazine did not elaborate on what the tapes might contain, but with multiple women now claiming that they too were sexually harassed by the former CEO, we have an idea. In the settlement negotiations, 21st Century Fox, the parent company here, is reportedly asking Ailes to fund part of any agreement with Carlson, as they should. Ailes had denied all the allegations, but according to Vanity Fair, his attorneys are pushing to have the negotiations with Carlson take place in private arbitration due to the recordings. If they litigate the case, all the tapes will become public, directly and through others, a source said. Then you will have a parade of women come in. Nobody wants that. Another Fox News personality joined that list Monday. New York Magazine reported that Andrea Tantaros was allegedly demoted and then later taken off the air after accusing Ailes of sexual harassment in 2015. But sources told BuzzFeed News and Politico that Tantaros had never complained about Ailes, but instead made allegations against at least 4 other people that, by the way, relevant even directly to Ailes for creating that kind of hostile work environment. That's a big part of the sexual harassment claim and the real danger of this sexual harassment claim. That even if the harasser, for whatever reason, decides to stop harassing you, somebody else may just pick up and do it too because they've gotten the signal that it's okay. All right, and so we know the allegations were against other Fox News employees and on-air guest personalities. Meanwhile, CNN Money's Dylan Byers says Fox News staffers feared that Ailes was spying on them. On Sunday, New York's Gabriel Sherman reported that the CEO used the Fox News budget to hire consultants, political operatives, and private detectives to go after journalists he considered his enemies. Byers adds that 6 current and former employees told him the network's producers and on-air talent were afraid that the CEO was tapping their phones and monitoring their conversations. Like Donald Trump with that Mar-a-Lago setup. Remember that one? We all believe our phones are tapped and that we are monitored, one Fox personality said. People definitely felt that the clicks on the line, interesting, were coming from the inside. It's coming from inside the house. Ah. The sources presented no proof that Ailes was actually spying on them, but even if their fears were unfounded, it may explain how Ailes kept the lid on the harassment allegations for so long. I guess it would. That's an interesting thing. I wonder about, like, why are we still in the era where the technology is so bad that you can't record somebody's telephone conversation without making clicks on their line? Though it occurs to me, again, that it would make a pretty good, if you didn't really have the technology to do the recording that you wanted to do, or didn't really want to get caught up in actually recording other people's conversations and one day go down for that. I guess the thing to do is see if you can install technology that will just make people's lines, at work anyway, make their lines make clicking noises. And then everybody will think they're being recorded, and that's just as good in terms of suppressing word of your sexual harassment, I suppose. That appears to have worked very well. By the way, I saw one of the tweets to which I had referred earlier float by. That gives me the opportunity to bring up the Chicago Tribune tweet and then click on to their piece, I hope, which, at least in the tweet here, is headlined, yes, wife of a Bears lineman wins a bronze medal the other day, in Rio Olympics. And, yeah. And then, as somebody notes here in their tweet, how do you look at your newborn baby and name them wife of a Bears lineman? How do you like that? And she's standing there with her bronze medal. And there she is, just wife of a Bears lineman. Let's go find out who that wife is. The person we're talking about here goes by the name, ordinarily, of Corey Cogdell. Cogdell? Cogdell. She is, in fact, wife of Bears lineman Mitch Unrein. And it turns out she's won a bronze medal in Rio for one of the shooting sports. Here she is in, let's say, her branded, sponsored, hearing protection, what do they call them? Well, I don't know. They're not ear muffs, per se, but that's what they look like. But sponsored by Cabela's, and she's got herself a nice Olympic rings tattoo on the inside of her left wrist, along with what looks like a Big Dipper tattoo, which is she an astronomer? Is she Alaskan? What's the story here? It looks like the stars, the Big Dipper and North Pole star motif from the Alaskan flag. Anyway, let's see. All on the sidebar over here, by the way, is a picture of her with her, I guess she's trap shooter. She's got a shotgun broken down and over her shoulder. The sidebar story says Corey Cogdell aims for gold in Rio. She got bronze, but still pretty good shot. But Bears won't allow her husband to join her. So at least one headline in the Chicago Tribune referred to her by name and just mentioned, the Bears employ her husband. So I guess that's good. But I guess if we're finally talking about a win, you might as well say what her name is in the headline. So that's the news. She won bronze medal in women's trap shooting on Sunday. This is her third Olympic Games, but her husband wasn't able to go because he's in camp with the Bears. And anything else? Here we go. She's from Eagle River, Alaska, so that explains the tattoo. She won the bronze in the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. She placed 11th in London 4 years ago. I guess then she shot everybody who finished ahead of her, and now she's done better. She didn't. She won by sheer grit and determination and training. So, there we go. Now we know who it was and what she won. And it feels important after criticizing everybody else for not bringing up her name. I thought we ought to do it at the very least. Okay. What else have we got here that requires sharing? Well, nothing requires sharing. Why don't we just sit here and talk to each other? How you doing, everybody? What's new? Got any stories you want to share? Now would be the time. Let's see. I have a couple other things tucked away, of course. No need for you to fill in the blanks, but we're going to have to change gears. One I wanted to add, let's see, at least one gun fail story for the day. And I feel like if I scan down a little bit more, I'll find a few more. Which reminds me it's time to put out, time to get serious about trying to catch up on some of these things. I think I'm still stuck in April, several months behind. It's becoming more and more difficult to put these things out with a regular schedule. Summer's a tough time for it. Anyway, I wanted to bring up this story. There's a new category that I feel like I might have to start cataloging, so that I have the numbers at the ready, or at least the cases at the ready, when I run into people on Twitter who I bother answering, who like to insist that these things wouldn't happen if your kids were properly trained in the handling of guns from an early age. You know that old story. And I know we've got examples all over the place of stories where a kid has been accidentally shot or has accidentally shot someone else. And there's a line usually in the story somewhere that talks about how well trained those kids were, or how they were starting training, or they had been given training. And I know you know some of those examples. Of course, there's the Michael Holsworth story where his dad, John, insisted that all his kids were trained in firearm safety, and Michael won't. I don't need to put gun locks on my guns because Michael won't touch it. He's been trained not to. In other words, he had gotten the Eddie Eagle program. But nonetheless, climbed the dresser, grabbed the gun, and shot himself in the face. There's a story of the family in, I think Crozet, Virginia, the pastor's family, where the 10-year-old boy was cleaning his shotgun or hunting rifle. He had been trained thoroughly. He had the hunter training course, the gun safety course. He knew his gun safety, but he accidentally, in cleaning a gun that was still loaded, shot and killed his sister right in the house. But again, trained, so much training. Jamie Gilt, the big gun advocate down in Florida, whose 4-year-old loved to go shooting and, in fact, would get jacked, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, to go shooting with her, and that she was training from an early age so that he would never have this kind of accident. Of course, shot her in the back. The list goes on, and I know I've got more examples, and I thought it would be very important one day to put all of those things together just to let everybody know that this happens quite frequently. And we have another entry from this week, this time in Cleveland County, North Carolina. This story I picked up yesterday. A 17-year-old Cleveland County boy whose parents enrolled him in countless hours of hunting, weapons safety, and concealed carry courses accidentally shot and killed himself while cleaning a rifle over the weekend. Just exactly what we're talking about. And of course, tragic situation, the parents rightly mourning their loss and talking about what a great kid he was and how he was all the things that you'd want to say or have others say about your son, and his plans for his senior year in high school and post-high school and what he wanted to do with his life. But there you are. Once again, it's one of those things that just, I want to bring those examples up every time I speak to somebody on Twitter who says, well, that won't happen to me or my kids because I've trained my kids. See, all you got to do, people got to stop being afraid of guns. You got to train your kids from an early age, etc. And there's no doubt, I mean, I don't think I would dispute that training them is better than not training them, especially if you're going to have guns around. And certainly it pays to if you're not going to have guns around, to tell kids, well, if you encounter a gun, Let me tell you a couple of scary stories about people who thought it would be okay to just pick it up and check it out, because it's really not. And, in addition to telling kids you should not touch it and you should, tell an adult that there's a gun over here and let them handle it, in addition to, if somebody else picks it up, get the hell out of there. And let me tell you some stories about people who didn't. These things can go wrong. But just as that can go wrong, train them all you want, things go wrong anyway. I find those kinds of stories fairly amazing. And even more amazing is the abundance of those stories, and that in the face of that abundance, there are still people who say, well, it just won't happen, because I haven't bothered to read any stories like that, or I just think I'm awesome, or my kids are smarter than that kid, or whatever. In addition to starting off the story with that he had been enrolled in countless hours of safety training, there's also comments like, let's see, down here, certainly lots of comments from the parents here. I can't believe he did it. I think he picked it up and was just going to wipe it down and realized there was a round in the chamber. Okay, so he realized, or I imagine they wanted to either say he didn't realize or whatever. But Dave Parsons, the father here, still in disbelief. His son, who has been educated about weapons safety since he was small, didn't follow all of the steps. 20 years in the Army, so I drilled into him. You don't know if a weapon is loaded until you clear it, Dave Parsons says. He just didn't do that step. Yeah, that's how it goes. People know the steps. People know they're supposed to do the steps, but sometimes they just don't do the steps. But we wouldn't have these problems if people just did the steps. I know. But they don't do the steps. But that's not the gun's fault. That's their fault. I know whose fault it is. But I'm pointing this out to you. When you argue this stuff with people, you need to, logically speaking, I can't make you do it, and I can't make you realize the logic of it, but you just can't say things like, well, if they would just do the steps. Because they don't do the steps. I don't know. There's no other way for me to say it. They trained him and trained him and trained him. And he still just wouldn't do the steps. There's a danger here. And part of the danger is you can't seem to make people do the goddamn steps. So let's think about this stuff. I believe yesterday, I don't know whether I found out on the air or it was a comment I made immediately afterwards, but I saw, I probably saw Scott Charles tweeting a story about a prosecutor in, I think, Indiana, who yesterday was in the news for accidentally firing a gun that he had. Yeah, I don't think we got to talk about it on the air. Fired a gun that he had in the pocket of his shorts. I imagine he was off from work, and most prosecutors don't go to work in jorts, it was noted. And most people thought the larger crime here was the jorts. But he had been a responsible gun owner for years, carries a gun in his job for 36 years. He'd been carrying a gun on the job and had no problems. In other words, one of those people who's constantly saying, I'm a responsible gun owner, I follow the rules, I follow the steps, and I have been carrying a gun for 35 years and I've never had a problem, and so therefore I never will, and neither will anybody I know, etc., etc. It wasn't until the 36th year, though, that he decided what he now thinks about guns and gun safety, that probably, thinking about it, it wasn't a particularly smart idea to carry a gun with a round chambered and without a holster jammed into his shorts pocket. It took 36 years as a responsible gun owner for this guy to get around to this realization. Holsters they exist for a reason. Having a round chamber, I mean, imagine, we run into this all the time, people about the rounds chamber. It's totally safe. You got to pull the trigger. Guns don't just go off, etc., etc. And now we're having this debate about concealed carry on campus in Texas. And you remember all the discussion about how we don't want to outlaw having a round in the chamber because most people like to carry with a round in the chamber. Well, most idiots like to carry with a round in the chamber, and some responsible people too. Yes. there's a mix of everybody involved in these things. But a lot of people carry with a round in a chamber, and if you require that the round not be chambered, then when people come onto campus, the first thing they're going to do is manipulate a gun in a way that, well, I mean, what they're essentially asserting here and admitting to is that manipulating a gun to clear a round from the chamber is the kind of activity that, well, gee whiz, I guess if you get right down to it, tends to result in accidental discharges. I'm sorry, negligent discharges. I'm sorry, the gun shot itself. It just went off. I don't know what happened. It must be a technical malfunction. And by the way, the prosecutor availed himself of a little trick that I find every time prosecutors and very often when police officers have this problem, they, I'm sending the gun for ballistic testing just to make sure that it wasn't a mechanical malfunction. Those things get to be accidents, but everybody else is negligent. Anyway, I'm just imagining that the guy for 35 years is walking around swearing on a stack of Bibles to anyone who will listen that carrying with a round chambered is not a problem. And it wasn't for 35 years. In the 36th year, it became a problem. Now, he had some other excuses, which was that it was a new gun. He had just bought it, which is, of course, another of those dangerous times. Now, interestingly, it's the transition time coming onto campus and having to to clear a round from the chamber to comply with campus carry rules, that has some danger inherent to it. So that we believe in. But the transition to a new gun, that has some danger inherent to it too. So why don't we just say you can't have any more new guns? What about that? No, that's not sensible? Well, no. That interferes with our Second Amendment rights, yada, yada, yargle, bargle. Anyway, I'm just pointing out that this guy for 35 years believed that carrying with a round chambered was a perfectly safe thing to do, and then all of a sudden found out it wasn't, as he got himself a new 9mm, and I was pretty sure the safety was on, and then he shoved the gun in his pocket of his shorts here. Oh, I'm distracted, by the way, by a Talking Points memo tweet that appears to show a photo enhanced, so you could see what's going on in the background. Father of Pulse nightclub shooter attends Clinton rally near Orlando. Interesting. I wonder in what context that is being reported. Anyway, I just found that that particular story of the prosecutor to be rather amazing. Just another one of those stories that, requires a little bit of extra discussion. That this guy only at this point comes to the realization that he's done something dumb, and if you get into gun discussions with people online, you're going to run into people who say exactly that. My kids won't touch it. Well, that's just what John Holtzworth said. Exactly what Jamie Gilt said. And then they did touch it. Well, I've been carrying for 35 years without an accident, and blah, 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 and you just got to follow the rules. Well, that's what this guy, Madison County, Indiana prosecutor Rodney Cummings, used to say that all the time, apparently. Thankfully, he was not hurt in the accident, and no one else just by way of letting you know where he was, I believe Texas Roadhouse was the restaurant, and I think that's the second time I've seen a gun fail of some kind in a Texas Roadhouse. But if I remember correctly, the last one was just a gun that was forgotten in a booth at the restaurant. I'll have to check up on that too. That's why I still want one of those searchable databases built so I can find that out quickly. I know in the back of my mind I've seen it. I just can't put my finger on it. Anyway, just thought that was sort of interesting. He sort of felt like that was an excuse to say it was a new gun. I've only had it for a couple of weeks. I always try to be as safe as I can. Carrying a gun in my pocket is probably not the smartest move. Well, thankfully nobody got hurt in your discovery phase of your years of responsible gun ownership. Just wanted to bring that up and let you know that that's out there. Good armor, I think. Good armament, I should say, for discussions with gun enthusiasts online. Okay. Other things we might want to dive into. Let's see. Well, a couple of interesting approaches to Donald Trump stuff, and I guess we haven't spent a great deal of time on Trump yet today. Let me just do a little bit of scanning here and see if there aren't some other things that we aren't overlooking. There's a million things here. Pocket is getting overpopulated, I would say. It's just rather amazing how much stuff there is to choose from here. All right, we'll scroll back up towards the top and get the more recent things and talk a little bit more about Trump. I think a cogently argued piece about what Trump is really up to on the campaign trail, as I was just sort of talking at the top of the show about how he just seems to BS his way through answers that he doesn't know anything about, or even when he thinks he does know about something, right? What do we need? What about all these foreign policy and national security experts who don't want to have anything to do with it? Well, look at Iran, look at the Middle East. It's a mess. They made it a mess. I think it's a mess. I wouldn't want to talk to them anyway, so therefore this whole thing is a net positive, right? Well, Fareed Zakaria has a piece in the Washington Post that sort of sums it up and even goes right to the terminology of BS, right? A few days ago I was asked, he says, on CNN to make sense of one more case in which Donald Trump had said something demonstrably false and then explained it away with a caustic tweet and an indignant interview, which I guess seems to be his pattern. I replied that there was a pattern here and a term for a person who did this kind of thing, a BS, although he gets to just write the word, a BS artist. I got cheers and boos for the comment from partisans on both sides, but I was not using that label casually, which I guess would get you in trouble. I was using it seriously, which means you can do it. Trump is many things, some of them dark and dangerous, but at his core he is a BS, and this time he really says BS artist. Harry Frankfurt, an eminent moral philosopher and former professor at Princeton, wrote a brilliant essay in 1986 called, well, I think I can just say it. The title of the piece is On BS. I'll just make everybody happy over there at We Act Radio and keep things simple. Frankfurt himself wrote about Trump in this vein, as have Jeet Heer and Eldar Sarajlik. In the essay, Frankfurt distinguishes crucially between lies and BS. Telling a lie is an act with a sharp focus. It is designed to insert a particular falsehood at a specific point. In order to invent a lie at all, the teller of a lie must think he knows what is true. But someone engaging in BS, Frankfurt says, is neither on the side of the true nor on the side of the false. His eye is not on the facts at all, except insofar as they may be pertinent to his interest in getting away with what he says. Frankfurt writes that the BSer's focus is panoramic rather than particular, and that he has more spacious opportunities for improvisation, color, and imaginative play. This is less a matter of craft than of art. Hence the familiar notation of the BS artist. This has been Trump's mode all his life. He boasts and boasts and boasts about his businesses, his buildings, his books, his wives. Much of it is a concoction of hyperbole and falsehoods, and when he's found out, he's like that guy we all have met at a bar who makes wild claims, but when confronted with the truth, quickly responds, I knew that. I saw over the weekend while I was watching the Olympics, there was an ad out the Clinton campaign has out, the interview on the Letterman show, where Letterman's asking about where his shirts and ties, which were, I guess, being introduced at the time, are made. I don't know where they're made, and as they note, he knows where they're made. And it was, the shirts were made in, I can't even remember where, Bangladesh, perhaps? And what she says, that's great, that's good. It's good because we're employing people in Bangladesh, that's good, or wherever it was. And, of course, then the cardinal sin, the ties were made in China, to which all he can do is, he, moves his head like, meh, and gives a little half shrug and raises his eyebrows like, meh, okay, so what? Call me. Who cares? Meh, I'm rich. You're not. But, of course, David Letterman's quite rich. But you in the audience are not. All right. Anyway, we'll continue with Zacaria's piece here. Take, for instance, the most extraordinary example, his non-relationship with Vladimir Putin. In May of 2014, addressing the National Press Club, Trump said, I was in Russia, I was in Moscow recently, and I spoke indirectly and directly with President Putin, who could not have been nicer. In November 2015, at a Fox Business debate, he said of Putin, I got to know him very well because we were both on 60 Minutes. Did Trump really believe that you could say something like that on live TV and no one would check? Did he think that no one would notice that the 60 Minutes show consisted of 2 separate pre-recorded interviews with Putin in Moscow and Trump in New York? By that logic, I've gotten to know Franklin Roosevelt very well because I've run some clips of him on my television show. In fact, Trump was BSing. He sees himself as important, a global celebrity, the kind of man who should or could have met Putin. Why does it matter that they did not actually meet? Or look at the issue that fueled his political rise, birtherism. Trump said in 2011 that he had sent investigators to Hawaii and that they, quote, they cannot believe what they're finding, which has several meanings. But anyway, you remember that he insisted that he was doing this, and that's not even clear that he was. For weeks, he continued to imply that there were huge, huge findings to be released. He hinted to George Stephanopoulos, we're going to see what happens. Well, we did. Nothing. That was 5 years ago, in April 2011. Nothing happened. In fact, it appears highly unlikely that Trump ever sent any investigators to Hawaii. In 2011, Salon asked Trump attorney Michael Cohen for details about the investigators. Cohen said that it was all very secret, naturally. Trump said the same about his plan to defeat the Islamic State, which he can't reveal. He has boasted that he has a strategy to win solidly Democratic states this fall, but he won't reveal which ones. Even by Trump's standards, this one is a head-scratcher. Won't we notice when he campaigns in those places? Or will it be so secret that even the voters won't know? Of course, there are no secret strategies. It's just BS. Harry Frankfurt concludes that liars and truth-tellers are both acutely aware of facts and truths. They are just choosing to play on opposite sides of the same game to serve their own ends. The BS artist, however, has lost all connection with reality. He pays no attention to the truth. By virtue of this, Frankfurt writes, BS is a greater enemy of truth than lies are. Very interesting. We see the consequences. As the crazy talk continues, standard rules of fact, truth, and reality have disappeared in this campaign. Donald Trump has piled such vast quantities of his trademark product into the political arena that the stench is now overwhelming and unbearable. And that hits on some very important, very salient points. Very true. Thanks, Fareed, for coming on the show. I guess by Trump logic, I can say that that's partially true. All right. Well, let's see. There was that. And let's take a slightly different time. We need to get back to some of this investigation of just how Trump comes by so much of his money. I mean, we know that it all goes back to the inheritance from his dad, but I guess this is maybe the first look that I've seen at where even that came from, if I skim correctly. And of course, it gives us a chance to read from Jacobin magazine here, which is always going to bring us right up to the edge with almost any claim and any theory underlying the claim. But it gives us the proper bent, a good place to peek into the origins of the Trump fortunes, how the Trumps got rich. Samuel Stein, the writer here, the Trump fortune was built off, remember, we're reading from Jacobin here, theft from workers, from the state, and from the commons. I can get with this. Let's see where they take us. Most Americans know Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump as a reality television star and celebrity endorser. And that's true at this point. No one remembers where he originally started, much less where his dad started and the family before that. But in his home state of New York, Donald Trump has a different reputation. He's a real estate schmuck. That's the best way to put it. That really sums it up. Trump inherited his business, which consists of gilded and glassed condos, clubs, casinos, office towers, hotels, and golf courses throughout New York City and beyond, from his father, Fred Trump. Like the Dursts, Rudins, Zeckendorfs, and Lafrax, the older Trump ran a family-based real estate empire. Though these families still exert a great deal of power in New York City development politics, they are beginning to be outpaced by new corporate real estate titans like Extel, Vornado, Related, BlackRock, and others that use global investment capital to build glitzy new developments and buy out old affordable complexes. Donald Trump bridges these two modes, combining family business with corporate kitsch. From a capitalist perspective, Trump is a hard-working, if obnoxious, businessman. He inherited money from his father and made it grow. From a socialist point of view, however, he got his wealth by very different means. Theft. And, we're close enough to getting there. I certainly feel the same about all the goods and services that he appropriated from his suppliers along the way and then refused to pay for. Ruth Wilson Gilmore argues that America's richest families possess twice stolen wealth. A, profit sheltered from B, taxes. But in fact, Trump's fortune is triply stolen by wage theft from the workers who build and maintain his projects, not to mention the misappropriation of the goods and services from the contractors, tax theft from the state that enables him, and land theft from the common spaces he encloses. While he extols the benefits of private enterprise, Trump really got rich off public resources. Always room for a little bit of socialism in the morning. His behavior is by no means unique. All capitalists profit from worker exploitation. Just about all corporations try to avoid taxes in one way or another. And in a settler state, all land is stolen. But as usual, Trump embodies the most exaggerated version of a rotten system. Donald Trump's real estate business is premised on profit off of the labor of thousands of workers in construction, maintenance, and services. Each paycheck to each worker represents a small theft, the deduction of a portion of that worker's compensation for their boss's profits. But Trump has built on these everyday pilfers, increasing his fortune through straightforward wage theft. In 1980, he had assembled the lots and permits to start his biggest development, Midtown Manhattan's Trump Tower. First, his company had to demolish the asbestos-laden department store that occupied the lot. Trump's contractor hired 200 undocumented Polish workers to do that job for under $5 an hour. They worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, no overtime pay, many of them not paid even all of their paltry wages, and some did not get paid at all. They sued the contractor and Trump. Trump stalled and denied until finally settling 16 years later. And that in itself makes you rich, right? You just take all the interest on all the money you weren't paying them and then finally pay them part settlement of it and keep all the interest. Trump pulled a similar stunt at the Trump Soho, a mixed condo hotel development completed in 2010. And I mean, that's pretty close to now. The project was plagued by controversy, including the tragic death of Yuty Vanchitsky, a Ukrainian immigrant who fell from a poorly constructed scaffold while smoothing concrete on the 42nd floor. Once the project was up and running, Trump's operation began stealing wages from the service workers maintaining the hotel. When customers booked catered events, they were charged a 22% service fee, but none of that money went to his underpaid staff, who filed a class action lawsuit in March demanding back pay. How would you like that? 22% service fee. Oh, well, it's the tip. So, fine. You happily pay it. Oh, well, I didn't say I was giving it to them. I'm just saying I'm tacking it on as a service fee. Fees, the most insidious of chiseling that goes on out there. The way to make billions these days is any financial transaction of any size that takes place. You just tack on something and say it's a convenience fee, and people roll their eyes and pay it. And if you can just do it to enough millions of people, you'll be a billionaire. Trump has pulled these heists not only on construction and service workers, and that's a vertically integrated system right there, right? I'm gonna get rich in real estate. How? Building, developing things, and then selling. Build a condo and sell the condos to people. Yeah, but that takes a long time to get rich at. You got to build a lot of condos to make it really rich. How about if you build condos and sell them to people? But how about if you steal the wages of the people building the condo, and then or hotel or whatever, and then steal the wages of the people working in it later on, and it's just a guaranteed stream of income. Every building that you build is a stream of income because you can steal from the wages of the people maintaining the building. It never ends. Properly calculated, I guess that will make you a billionaire. All right, so where were we with this one? Trump has pulled these heists not only on construction and service workers, but also professional clients. He hired Andrew Tesoro, a New York City architect, to design Trump National Golf Club in New York's Westchester suburbs. While Trump was satisfied with Tesoro's work, he nonetheless underpaid the architect by thousands of dollars. Tesoro is now telling his story in videos for the Clinton campaign. Saw it. Good one. Which has been hit by its own accusation, the Clinton campaign, they note, of unpaid contracts and intern exploitation. Well, I'm sure quite true, quite common, happens everywhere. But on a scale like this, it takes Trump. If we look beyond Trump's employees to include his customers, the profits he's earned through theft grows exponentially. From the rent-regulated tenants he tried to evict to the working class people he swindled into enrolling at Trump University, the Republican candidate has made a fortune taking other people's wages, savings, and time. Throughout his career, Donald Trump has adeptly dodged taxes and gathered subsidies. In this way, he has not only... Whoops, I've lost my space here. Armando is joining us here. Hang on just a second, Armando. I'll get through this paragraph. Where was it? In this way, he has not only shorted the public, but also depleted budgets for socially beneficial programs. The practice began with money passed down from his father. Fred Trump excelled at getting public subsidies and tax abatements, allowing him to amass quite a fortune, while his son claims that his business started with a, as he says, small $1 million loan from his father. This isn't entirely factual. Fred Trump has established $1 million tax-sheltered trusts for each of his children and grandchildren, and according to the Washington Post, Donald Trump made from starting back in 1977, $19,000 in 1977, $47,278, $70,000 in 79, $90,000 in 1980, and $214,605 in 1981. This is all from just trust income. Trump's father didn't give him a loan. He provided him a reliable source of income that increased every year. Then, when Fred Trump died, Donald received an estimated $40 million from his $250 million estate. Of course, we all know about that, but I'm interested in this wage theft aspect for sure. Armando, what motivates
Well,
you
David,
this morning?
just the other day you detailed that Fred Trump steered consulting contracts, consulting in quotes, to up his son's salaries or income. Mm-hmm. So to say he got $1 million or he had a trust, he did more than that. Everything Donald Trump was able to have is because of who his father was.
Yes.
Period. End of story. And the fact is, if he had just taken the money his father gave him and just put it in the stock market, he'd be actually a billionaire today instead of what he is.
Well, if he had put it in
a fraud
in CDs or money market funds, would require. I mean, you get a lump sum like that, you can park it in the lowest risk thing there is and just live forever on the money and live very, very well.
Now, no one will be talking about you. You can't slap your name on a bunch of buildings, but you'll have much more money than you have if you did what Trump did.
Yeah. It's mostly garbage.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, well, that's...
It's just, I tell you what spurred my call, just to give you...
Yeah, sure.
That article you're reading makes it sound like Trump is John D. Rockefeller.
I see.
He's a pity anti-con artist fraud. He's P.T. Barnum. He's not John Rockefeller. This is not the great class struggle. But go ahead.
I agree. Actually, that's a good point. He's a genius when it comes to stealing a couple of bucks from everybody's paycheck. And I guess his formula for success, he would have drowned in debt he did drown in debt a couple of times, but he'd be finished forever if he wasn't also, manipulating the tax system and stealing wages and shorting contractors and trading on reputation in ways that, are, well, to put it as mildly as possible, undue. That he goes to lenders and says, you should lend me $40 million to make this project happen. I will waste all the money and blow it on other stuff. And net, he'll end up in a spot where nobody is able legally to throw him out of the Trump Tower penthouse that is covered in gold and still makes him look like a rich guy. But he's just not adding any money to his pile. All he's doing is staying afloat, and people aren't evicting him and admitting that he's broke yet.
Well, I just think it's going to be, but suppose, let's take a hypothetical. He gets beaten by 8 or 9 points in this election. He doesn't pay himself back the $50 million that he funded, which is probably a third of his total liquid assets. So it's a huge chunk of money that he's thrown in there for him and for anybody, but for him, it's about a third of his wealth, really, that he spent on this campaign. And he comes back and he's a loser, right. Big loser, and a crazy person. What is the Trump brand worth? And this matters because Donald Trump's real income comes from selling the name Trump. He is basically a Kardashian. That's who he is. If you love his business, then you should really be for the mother, the Kardashian mother. She was a brilliant businessman. She didn't have any money from anybody. Mm-hmm. And she actually really did build a branding business out of nothing. Unlike Trump, who took all this money from his father. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, I think that's a good point. It'll be interesting to see whether he can maintain his lifestyle just continuing to fleece fans.
I don't think so.
I mean, that's a much smaller pool of people that he can draw from. Already interesting, just sort of technology measure on this. I think maybe it was Google or some in a related sector who tracks these things, like basically the number of what's the app where you go Foursquare.
You were thinking of Foursquare and the visits to Trump branded properties,
right? Yeah,
and
people are just
15%,
avoiding going, or they're wandering by and taking selfies of themselves giving the finger to the Trump name. I noticed that that's an uptick on that. But
listen, at this point, rich people are embarrassed to say they live in a Trump property.
Yeah, well, Keith Olbermann, I discover through the grapevine because I can't read his tweets because I'm still blocked.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
That's funny. I don't get that. He should block me and unblock you.
Well, blocking is a random thing.
I'm much harsher on him than you are.
Oh, I wasn't harsh
on him.
But
he did. He talked about his Trump property.
Yeah, and he sold his Trump co-op place or whatever.
Co-op condo, whatever.
I don't know what the deal was. Anyway, and in case you're wondering, I believe Keith Olbermann blocked me because I guess it's going on about 3-4 years ago after a mass shooting when I don't know, I said something on Twitter and he was like, oh no, it's too soon. And I said, you know what, F you, man, the too soon thing is over. There's no such thing as too soon anymore. And he insisted, screw you, I'm me and you're you. F you, you're blocked. Meanwhile, a couple of years later, is the too soon thing done, or was I wrong? Okay, there you go. I win. So I'll move on with the this other article instead. Go on with Donald Trump. Donald Trump's first big break. Okay. Armando probably driving somewhere. Just as well. I guess we'll get the wind noise out of things, and you can follow along. So where were we? Trump's father didn't give him a loan. He provided him a reliable source of income that increased every year. Then, of course, when he died, $40 million in Donald's pocket. But, yeah, the idea that he gave him even the loan of $1 million, it's nuts that only Donald Trump would walk around saying that's a small loan to give him. But in addition, we've read a number of the other things, right? Going down and buying $3 million worth of chips at one of the casinos and just stick them in a vault. Plus, of course, the trusts. Plus, of course, all the contracts. Armando, welcome back. All the contracts that he steered his way. There was millions and millions of dollars going from Fred Trump's pocket into Donald's. And don't forget that eventually when Fred Trump Jr., when he was sick or his kids were sick and Donald was nowhere to be found and couldn't be bothered to help pay for their medical treatment at some point. What a champ.
He cut them off the health insurance.
Yeah. So I'm sure Fred Sr., I don't know, was he turning over in his grave or was he celebrating his son's capitalist awakening? Donald Trump's first big break came with the opportunity, they say here in this magazine, Jacobin's piece, with the opportunity to buy and renovate the Commodore Hotel in 1980. In the process of turning it into the Grand Hyatt Hotel, he tore down the building's landmarked sculptures, wrapped the facade in glass, and quietly demolished what he was supposed to preserve. Whoops. Oh well, it's gone. Just like the trees on his golf course. Oops, I disobeyed. Will it be a large fine I'll have to pay? Thanks to his father's history of making large donations to city officials, though, Trump received a 40-year tax exemption from the Urban Development Corporation, double the standard, and the first of its kind. To this day, he pays no state taxes on the luxury hotel. When he began building Trump Tower, he applied to New York City's Department of Housing Preservation and Development, the HPD, for a $20 million tax break. Mayor Koch's, remember when we used to pronounce K-O-C-H as Koch rather than Coke? Mayor Koch's HPD Commissioner Anthony Gliedman denied the application, but Trump sued and won, and the city was ordered to grant the abatement in full. 3 years later, Gliedman went to work for Trump, advising him on future government negotiations. In 2004, the New York City Economic Development Corporation granted Trump an additional 12-year abatement on the commercial portion of Trump Tower, a $164 million tax break on a property worth $237 million. How do you even make that work? As his business grew, Trump began consolidating his corporations and LLCs to a single address. The fictional companies that own 40 Wall Street, Trump Carousel Central Park, I didn't even realize that was a thing, and almost 400 other Trump businesses are not registered to his New York City headquarters, but to one sleepy office building in Delaware, America's onshore tax haven. Hillary Clinton, by the way, because this is Jacobin magazine, Hillary Clinton uses the exact same building for her corporate registrations. Everybody got a hand in that pot, I guess.
Yeah, just let me correct you. Delaware is not a tax haven. That's not why you register in Delaware. But go ahead.
That's true. I guess I guess it could help with taxes eventually, but it's not an offshore tax haven. Well, it's not offshore, obviously.
It's not offshore. It doesn't save anything. I mean,
it doesn't change taxes. It just gives you a better venue for business law cases.
Absolutely, and it has, a corporate governance regime that is pretty easy on corporations.
And it may
but
sometimes,
it's not a tax avoidance.
It may sometimes reach to taxes, but a tax haven is about if your money is here, there's no tax. Oh, right. Okay. On top of his tax breaks, Trump has finagled a number of city and state subsidies. His Bronx golf course, which sits in the middle of a public park in New York's poorest borough, is only the most recent example. The city paid $230 million to clean up the site and develop the course. Trump was only responsible for building the clubhouse and managing the park, which is also par for the course.
Just as an aside, that's one of the dumpiest golf courses that you'll ever see. It has like 3 trees on the entire course.
That may be. So dog track. All right. Well, not unfamiliar with his stuff.
It's not a premier golfing venue.
All right. Well, I can believe that, but it's nice to have golf there and everything. But I said par for the course. No pun intended there. But what Trump does essentially, very often. His reputation, I build things, I make things. And what he tends to do is jump in the middle of somebody else's project and say, I'll overpay for this project. And they say, okay, fine. And then he slaps Trump on it and says, look what I made. So, same thing here.
I saw Trump talking about his best deals, and the Grand Hyatt deal was a great deal for him, and not the least of which because he got the huge tax exemption.
Yeah.
But it was not anything that had to do with his acumen. He wanted to be in Manhattan, and the real estate market was down, and his father, as you reported the other day, guaranteed the loans that he needed to acquire it. Mm-hmm. He let Donald say he owned it, even though the reality is it was the father who owned it. And that was a good deal. The other one was his West Side, those monstrosities on the West Side for those people who live in Manhattan or have been to Manhattan. If you drive up the West Side Highway, there's a bunch of Trump buildings, residential. Those were good deals for him, too. But, those are two good deals out of 1,000, and 900 of them have been bad. He's really been a very bad businessman.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody has documented that pretty well. And by the way, when we say that I reported it, I think we should say I read it out loud. But yeah, that between us, we say, hey, I reported that. I reported that someone else had reported it. So I'm good at that. I'm like Trump, really. That's my brand. Okay. Let's see. There was also public subsidies have also allowed Trump to pay no rent for the first 4 years of his 20-year lease in, I guess that is at the golf course that we were just talking about. In year 5, he'll pay 7% of the rent, and in year 10, he'll be up to paying 10% of what would normally be the normal rent for occupying that public space. And again, right, I'm sure that when they were thinking, should we put a golf course in the middle of a public park in the Bronx? The Bronx is bad off enough as it is in terms of public resources. Why don't we steal one, give it to Donald Trump, and let him operate a golf course there and keep all the money? Well, it'll create jobs, plus it'll bring in revenue for the area, for the Bronx. Well, not in terms of taxes. Certainly the rent is out the window, and I guess maybe there's some people cleaning clubs there that were, otherwise would be cleaning your windshield, perhaps. But can't see the major benefit there for the Bronx, especially if after 10 years he's still only paying 10% of what the rent should be. And, by the way, he'll chase you right the hell off of that golf course if you decide to walk on it. In the meantime, New York City residents are covering also his water and sewer bills to the cost of roughly $1 million a year. None of the nearby affordable housing complexes have subsidies anywhere near as generous. Trump also manages to avoid paying taxes on his residence. His Manhattan apartment receives an abatement to the tune of $20,493 a year, including a small credit from the New York State School Tax Relief Program, even though that program has an income cap of $500,000. Make more than that, you can't get your credit. Does he make more than that? I don't know. Haven't seen his taxes. The problem with Trump's tax avoidance and tax return release avoidance is not just that he, like many rich people, pays less than the rest of us. It is that taxation is one of the ways society reclaims what capitalists take from workers. Just a little socialism again for the morning, but true. By avoiding taxes while simultaneously winning subsidies, Trump adds a second and more generalized layer of theft onto his business model. And then the next section here, expropriating land, is another practice Donald learned from his father. Besides the golf course, there's more. An important part of Fred Trump's business model was urban renewal, which they enclose in scare quotes here. This program allowed the government to seize and clear property using eminent domain, which conservatives allegedly hate, then turn the land over to sponsors for new developments. Remember, we are going to be, this now goes to the heart of pouring trillions of dollars into titties like Detroit.
Right, into inner titties.
Oh, my God, that makes it worse. Oh, my God. Well, he never said that. I should be clear about that.
I did. Blame me.
But I can't believe they didn't laugh. But that's the Detroit Economic Club for you. They were very staid about it. Congratulations to them. To complete Fred's largest project, Trump Village on Coney Island. Back in the day when they were on Coney Island. How appropriate for a clown like Donald. The state had to evict almost 1,000 families. It's like they're building an Olympic village all of a sudden in Beijing. Many of them African American. Which wouldn't happen in Beijing. But okay. The land was actually reserved for a union-run housing project. How about that? That would have been some kind of... I bet, back in the day, you would have such a thing. A union-run housing project. But Fred used his political benefactors to block that development until the city gave him half the land and a lucrative tax break. Wow. I would like to know what the plans for the union-run housing project were. Nearby... The Klan sympathizer, that's Fred. I mean, that's the one they're talking about in this case. Built Beach Haven Apartments, the segregated development where Woody Guthrie wrote the song Old Man Trump. And they quoted here, of course, I suppose Old Man Trump knows just how much racial hate he stirred up in the blood spot of human hearts when he drawed that color line here at his 1800 family project. This is Donald Trump's inheritance. The younger Trump tried his hand at eminent domain, but without much success. He famously attempted to remove an elderly homeowner from her Atlantic City house in order to build a parking lot, but the courts stopped him. Around the same time, he tried a similar scheme in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where he hoped to evict 5 businesses in order to build a waterfront tourism complex. Once again, he botched the approval process. Though he failed at stealing private land, Trump has become quite good at privatizing public space. In the most famous incident, he seized the Central Park ice skating rink. Wow, how many troops does he have?
Yeah, he didn't really. I mean, I'm actually curious to hear how they frame this, because I remember that very well.
Well, they put it this way. The rink had been closed from 1980 to 1986 following a disastrous, if well-intentioned, experiment in alternative energy. The ice would not freeze, causing a major headache for Mayor Koch, who finally went to the Board of Estimates, now known as the City Council, with a plan to fix it. Still stinging from the Koch administration's initial denial of his Trump Tower tax abatement, Trump jumped at the opportunity to humiliate the mayor. That does sound familiar, at least as a pattern of behavior. According to Koch political biographer Jonathan Sofer, a keen neoliberal, Donald Trump always saw a way to communicate an ideological message, this is rather pointed, that the private sector was more efficient than government, and offered to take charge of the rebuilding of the rink. Once again, leaning on his father's political connections, he convinced the board to deny Koch's plan, and instead to fund his company to do virtually the same thing in the same time frame and for the same amount of money. At least it's the same amount of money. Garnering favors from contractors who wanted to work on future Trump projects and benefiting from the oversight of former Koch administration member Glideman, remember him, Trump completed the renovation in just 5 months. His successful political cronyism became a case study in free market triumphalism, and in historian Joshua Freeman's telling, the media hailed him as the embodiment of one of the lessons of the 1975 New York City fiscal crisis. Let the genius of private enterprise replace the morass of government bureaucracy. The rink now operates as a private concession within the park and contributes to Trump's enormous wealth. Want me to pause there for your own reaction? What did you think of that? I mean, does that comport
for my reaction?
Yeah.
It's what was known as the Wallman Rink back in the day in the 80s, and it was, the city just didn't get it done for whatever reason. And Trump did whatever he does, and he got it done in 6 months. But it's a skating rink, for Christ's sake. It's not like he took over the Met.
That's true. I guess
it was a skating rink that was closed. I thought it was hilarious that people cared that much about it at the time. Trump got a lot of publicity out of it. New York Post loved it, of course. Yeah. Well, but I mean, the scheme of privatizing theft in things in New York City, this guy was a piker. Robert Moses stole so much more than Trump that it's not even funny.
Well,
but sure, I mean, Jacobin magazine,
Yeah.
they're trying to make this guy to be Rockefeller or whoever, and he's just some 2-bit hustler con artist from Queens.
I think that's important to keep in mind. I mean, I like this view of what he's doing, and it helps us understand how 2-bit he really is. I mean, this does tend to build him up a bit, but I mean, I guess, one, we find out that, look, it's all funded by inherited money. 2, the inherited money was all stolen anyway. 3, he's just made more bad deals than good, but I think this helps complete the picture.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, but let me take you back to something a segment of Trump's speech yesterday,
Okay.
And it comes from a New York Post article. Donald Trump portrayed himself as the savior of New York City.
Ah, yes, I remember you commenting on that.
Donald Trump was just a pimple on the butt of New York City at his best.
Yeah, well, pretty much. I mean,
he had one hotel that was successful. He had, the Trump Tower that was, which, it was on 5th and 55th, or rather 5th and 57th. I don't remember the exact address, but that's my point. I don't go to Trump Tower. Nobody cares about Trump Tower. I know there's a lot of out-of-towners. They come and get their picture taken, but Trump Tower's nothing.
Well, from afar
to New York City, it's nothing to Manhattan. It's a pimple on the butt of New York City.
And New Yorkers, I guess, are the ones who have to say that. But of course, out in heartland America, from afar, he's viewed as, well, he rose coincidentally with the revival of New York City as a family-friendly tourist destination, and the gentrification of Times Square, and that coincides with his fame in The Apprentice.
Does it? Actually, Times Square was Bloomberg. In the
90s. Does that make a difference?
In the aughts. It had nothing to do with Trump.
No, it doesn't. I say it coincides with all of that, and to the viewer of The Apprentice, who knows him from The Apprentice, as they start with at the top of the article, for people who know him that way versus New Yorkers and New York area people who know him as the real estate schmuck. I mean, the
real estate guys think he's a schmuck. I mean, This is the whole thing.
And I think you make a good point here in saying, well, can you imagine that now you're saying, well, I'm the living embodiment of let's privatize these things that the government has, because the government can't do it and private industry can. And his big example is a skating rink.
Do you think you could
do that with the defense budget? It's a little bigger.
I mean, it was like $500,000 project. Yeah. I mean, it was a skating rink, for Christ's sake. You can build a skating rink in Loudoun County, and it's not any great shakes, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's in Central Park, so people are nostalgic about stuff like that. Whatever.
Yeah, sure. I'm just saying it's a skating rink. I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, all right. And if he's the savior of New York City, why? That's okay. That's huge. Let's say you saved New York City. Why is Atlantic City a wreck? Look at Atlantic City. It's a mess. It's a mess. Believe me.
This is actually a good point, because the reality is, in the Atlantic City scenario, Trump was the biggest player.
Yeah.
He was huge.
And it's a wreck. It's a mess. Trust me. Believe me.
No, I mean, he had 3 of the 7 or 9 casinos, and 3 of the biggest ones. I mean, he was the big player in Atlantic City. If Atlantic City was a huge success, and Trump would say to you, I was a big part of this, or I was the biggest part of this,
I guess you'd
have a good argument, because he was the biggest player at Atlantic City.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, look what happened to Atlantic City, where he was the biggest player.
Yeah.
How's it doing?
It's a mess, believe me.
How'd he do?
He
went bankrupt.
Yep.
He went bankrupt.
Yeesh.
The people who invested in his public Trump entertainment resorts, whatever it was, they lost 95% of their investment in a 10-year period.
Yep.
The one time you could invest in Donald Trump, you lost all your money.
That's the bottom line.
This isn't John Rockefeller, people. This is a 2-bit P.T. Barnum who was a terrible, terrible, terrible businessman.
That's the bottom line. That's what they're making the argument of. I'm not going to be able to get to the rest of this.
The article's making the argument. Look at this great, how this titan of industry was a crook because socialism. I mean, it's ridiculous. I really don't like the premise of the article because it makes too much of a two-bit charlatan.
Okay. Well, I think it adds an interesting perspective and a good way of leveling an attack, particularly for those people inclined to the socialist worldview. But yeah, you make a very good point that this is not a Rockefeller. But then I guess they could at the very least, if I'm coaching them, I push back and say, well, capitalism works pretty well for the petty thief as well as
fair enough.
Tell that titan of industry.
Look here, watch how a petty thief exploited our class divisions.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll give you 5 minutes to be nice to those guys because I'm never a big fan of Jacobin magazine ever. So
I'll do
that's
that.
what drew me into.
I've got
All
one.
right, have a good one.
Thanks. You too. Well, I'll just finish up what I can in a minute or so before I begin wrapping up the show. We told you about we left off about his political cronyism being able to help him with that Central Park project, but then Trump's more recent Bronx golf course acquisition, as we mentioned earlier, an even greater case of public land theft. As they put it, the city acquired the site, the east side of Ferry Point Park, in 1937 to build the Whitestone Bridge. For decades, this section of the park was used as a garbage dump. That's not fun. But Mayor Bloomberg's Parks Department undertook a massive renovation to turn it into usable public space. Too bad about that. After spending millions in cleanup, the Bloomberg administration turned most of the park over to Trump. Whoops. And now he criticizes Trump. Oh well. The city kept less than 10 acres of shabby community park space, and Trump's 222-acre golf course thoroughly dominates the landscape. To use the facility, Trump charges $141 for weekdays and $169 on weekends, far more than the Parks Department to run golf courses. In just its first year, it made $8 million for Trump, which supposedly is Trump change to him. In addition to parkland, Trump has tried to privatize the public space at the base of Trump Tower. We actually heard about that on the show a couple months back. The atrium came out of a 1961 citywide rezoning, which created a property class of privately owned public spaces. Remember that? The program permitted developers to build above zoning limits as long as they provided open space for the public, either inside or outside of their buildings. And remember, that is public space, and so you're not supposed to block people from the rallies there. The most famous such space being, of course, Zuccotti Park, once home temporarily to Occupy Wall Street. By making the Trump Tower lobby fully accessible to the public, Trump was allowed to build an additional 20 stories worth roughly $530 million atop his skyscraper. Of course, there's more, lots more, but we don't have time to get to all of that. Instead, we want to hand things over to the guys on the after show and let them pick up the slack on all the stories that are important, but that I ignored. That's the luxury they afford to me. I steal that from them. Public time. What are they going to be covering? How about this? Last June, for the first time in 48 years, Orange County, California, voted Democratic, and people are still registering Democratic in droves. That's good news. There is a shocking arrogance behind one of America's worst gerrymanders, and the Supreme Court may not do anything about it. Again. And nearly half of all registered voters say America's infrastructure has deteriorated and want increased spending to fix it. We'll just get a fund. On the last half, they'll be visiting with Chris Reeves, who you may know as Tom Servo 433 from back in the day, for political news, campaign reports, and election strategies. He no longer gets the mention of being a delegate to the Democratic National Convention, but that was true, and we love him for it. Maybe next time he'll get that designation as well. Always a great source, always a great guest. Do stay tuned for all of that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Kos Community Calendar, and more.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waltman.
Is that amazing how quickly I can say Daily Kos Community Calendar? I should get one of those jobs reading disclaimer language in radio advertising. That would be a paying job. We can take that one. Anyway, do stay tuned for all of that and more on the After Show with Wink and Justice. Coming up next, we'll be back tomorrow with Joan McCarter. Stay tuned.